Sup, players? April 11th, Tuesday. And I've got a little over a month until the marathon, so I'm kind of looking at the downhill portion of my training. So I'm approaching taper, and just seems like an appropriate time to kind of review what I've done and why I did it. So, last fall I signed up for 2 marathons. Not intentionally. I actually signed up for one, kind of a race that I was really training for and targeted for. That went horribly wrong and became the first race I've ever dropped. And then so I signed up for another marathon the next weekend just to see if it was a fluke, and that one also kind of blew up. So I figure it makes sense to look at those 2 failures and then what have I done differently this time and is it working? So it's going to be a bit of a 2-part talk, but part 1 I think I'll review what went wrong on race day and how did I set up the training plan to avoid that, and then part 2 is kind of is it working? So the first thing is, as I've always done, I took out the marathons too quickly. Looking at the data from those races, I took them out in a pace that I had no hope of being able to hold. And it went wrong at different parts of the race, so I would say I knew things were going downhill by like mile 5 of the first race. And then I was able to hold on a little longer in the second one, but still obviously I took it out at a pace I couldn't maintain, which is just not smart race strategy. And that's I feel like easier to correct than a training issue. So that one I just have to keep it in the back of my mind, maybe set an alarm on my watch that goes off if I'm running too fast in the first couple of miles, and then stick to a pace, and then hopefully that'll help. But I don't think that was the only problem I had. I mean, just looking back and things I've read or watched since then, I feel like the volume of miles and the quality of miles I was getting in my training plan at that time were not right. So I did do some threshold work. The last time I trained, I did do some pace work, but most of it was during the week, and my long distance runs were all at a conversational pace, so I wasn't doing any pushing the pace in those workouts. So I feel like that prepared me to not do well on race day, because I was going to be trying to do something that was essentially brand new in the race, and that just, I feel like that's a recipe for disaster. So this time in training, first of all, I upped the mileage pretty noticeably. I would say I probably am doing 15 to 20 more miles a week, plus I've done some marathon pace work during my long runs. The longest marathon pace during a long run I've done was 40 minutes at marathon pace, and I was able to hold that and be pretty steady and not feel like I was dying, and it was at the end of my run, so that gives me some confidence that I'll at a minimum do better than I've been doing. And so that's kind of what I've done differently, and that leads us into, is it working? And after last weekend, it would have been tough to say yes. I ran or not last weekend maybe, but the one before, I ran a half marathon in a race, and again took it out too fast and blew up on it, and I was able to maintain and not really stop that much, but I had stomach issues, I had all sorts of problems, and I ended up running like just under a 140, which for me isn't really where I wanted to be. And so this last weekend, on Sunday, I ran a half marathon time trial, and this was much more in line with where I wanted to be. I ran it in almost 131 flat. So, I mean, you can see quite a difference from the weekend before. So that makes me feel better about my conditioning. But I was even able to take it a step further. So I had done a half marathon time trial during training for the last marathon, and I went back and looked at it, and it turned out I ran it in a 131.05. So almost exactly the same time, which might be a little demoralizing at first blush, because obviously I did not do well in my marathons after that. But, as I was able to dig in a little deeper, I noticed a few things that stood out. So the first one was that last July when I did my half marathon time trial during training, I did 300 feet of elevation gain. This time on Sunday, 417 feet of elevation. So, it was a little hillier. Next thing up, it was 64 degrees when I ran my half marathon time trial in July. It was 73 on Sunday, so it was warmer. Here's the big one though. There was 5-mile-an-hour winds last time. This time, 18-mile-an-hour winds. So it was much windier, it was hillier, and it was warmer. And I ran it 4 seconds faster than I did the last time. So that gives me a little bit more confidence. Also, I looked at my cadence numbers, and I went from 172 last time to 180 this time. So I'm doing that better as well. So I'm seeing some significant improvement. And then the final point of note is that my heart rate started to rise significantly at the end of the run last time, and my pace also dipped. This time I held my pace pretty steady, and my heart rate was pretty steady. So those factors tell me that I'm in better condition now than I was when I did my last time trial. So I guess the answer is it does seem to be working. What I'm doing is making a difference. So at this point, I need to stay healthy and stick to the plan. It's working, and that's it. So deuces.